So a few things before, I just want to share a couple more things. You can engage with us, offer comments, offer some love, ask questions in the Facebook feed in the comment section, and Carolina will be kind of monitoring that throughout. And hopefully by the end of this call, which is scheduled to end at around 6:30, but before then, hopefully there will be some time for Q&As for us to offer panelists some of the questions that are being asked. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Any other logistical things? I don't think if folks want to comment, if there are some logistical issues you're coming across, or just feel free to let us know in the comments as well. And let us know if where you're listening in from, what location. Yeah, just send us some love. So I wanted to share a story about my parents before we get into this. And both my parents have passed. And my earliest experience in working within the Viet community was doing civic engagement work, doing voter registration, voter education, going to stores and homes, and just talking to folks, you know, trying to encourage them to be more civically involved. And it was really eye-opening, and really gave me some really important insight into what this work looks like and feels like. But I was always struggling with this particular restriction around what kinds of conversations were possible. And politically, I was at that point in time becoming more, definitely more progressive, definitely more left, and ended up registering a lot of Republicans, right? And having folks, getting folks to go out and vote who were voting Republican. So I was just grappling with that. And so I remember having a conversation with my parents at the time around their voting. I just wanted to know, well, how have you been voting? What does that look like for you? And I was really surprised when they told me that they had never voted in their entire life, even though they're registered. And so I was like, why don't you vote? And they're like, well, you can vote, and and that's, I don't remember the exact reasons they shared as to why they didn't vote, but what they said in addition to that was actually what stayed with me. And it was, you can vote, but what are you doing for the rest of the year? What else are you doing to really, better the community? What else are you doing to really change the conditions of people's lives? They were both lifelong committed community members and temple goers. And so I grew up with that as a foundation. So I really grappled with that. I really grappled with some of the politics or the restrictions around electoral work and civic engagement, and what it meant to really move and build for the long term. So really that's the energy that I wanted to kind of offer in terms of this particular conversation. So thank you just for allowing me to share a little bit of that and kind of what some early foundation for me. I want to start us off and just have folks really also share in that spirit. Just the story of how each of you got involved in this work, and what has it meant for you along the way, and especially in this moment, to hold, conflict, to hold contradictions, to hold clarity. So yeah, we would love to hear more from each and every one of you. So who wants to go first? Who wants to add to the story time?
That was a beautiful story, Trung. I can share a little bit. I think after hearing your story, what's really resonating in my mind right now is actually tomorrow I'm doing an in-language Vietnamese panel on how to vote by mail, which is really important that we do in-language voter outreach so that our community members get the information that they deserve in order to participate in democracy. But at the same time, I also read an AAPI data poll that said that out of all the Asian American groups, Vietnamese Americans are most likely to support Trump. And it's just so heartbreaking to hold these contradictions of inviting our community members to participate in civic engagement while also holding that space of you know, acknowledging that there are many members in our communities that hold values different than the values that I think we all hold in this panel. And I think where I think the work that we all do and the work that I want to encourage everyone watching to continue to do is to not lose faith in these community members and to just write them off, right? These are complex individuals, they're human beings who I think the media writes them off as these like black and white flat characters, you know, like they're gonna, you know, the Vietnamese Americans are gonna do this. This is what they're like. And I think our communities deserve more credit than that. They are more complex and more human than the media writes them out to be. But that is not to say that working with our community is not without its complexities. So I don't really have an answer. I am just sharing in the feeling of conflictedness that you're sharing.
Great, thank you, Lan. And we'll definitely go a little bit deeper into that conflictedness as well. Somebody want to go next?
I can go because I really want to reflect on what Lang just said about the experiences of talking to our community members and honor them in all of their complexities. So I just want to share a story around the theme of clarity that you mentioned, Ton. I had been doing quite a bit of electoral organizing from about end of 2015 all the way to about 2018. And I'm calling in from the city of Washington, and we had a historic election season for two people of Vietnamese descent to be, one was running for the state senate and one was running for the House of Representatives. And we recognized that we needed to reach out to people who only speak Vietnamese as their primary language. So I did a lot of translation for the scripts because the script was all in English. But even with the translation, it was pretty formulaic. It was fairly, you know, it has that formula. It has that almost like sort of robotic feel. And I was calling a person who's a little bit older. I think this person was maybe in her 60s or 70s. And I was feeling really nervous because I was just going off the script. And she said to me, "Con giọng con dễ thương quá à. Con có chồng chưa? Are you married? Your voice sounds so cute." And I was just, you know, I didn't have anything to say because literally that's not part of the script. And I literally just kind of freestyled the rest of the conversation, and she said, "Có chồng chưa? Sao cái thằng này trong nhà này không muốn ông ai muốn có chồng, không ai muốn cưới vợ." And she literally wanted to tell me about how her kids did not want to get married. And she literally had never had that conversation from any campaign. No one had ever reached out to her and talked to her in Vietnamese about any issues. And yeah, that left an impression on me because, like you said, Lang, there's so much more connection when we're talking to voters one to one. Yeah, that's my story.
I want to piggyback off of that story and of all the stories that y'all are sharing, because my first foray into doing any work with the Vietnamese American community related to electoral politics was also nonpartisan, and it was in 2016. I registered a lot of Vietnamese voters, but I couldn't talk to them about who they were going to vote for. And so I would go home at night and wonder if I was causing more harm than good, because I was like, am I sending all these people to the polls to vote for Trump? So I share that conflict too, but I also feel warm-hearted by the story that Nikki just shared, because then what happened in after Trump got elected, I basically said, I am not doing nonpartisan work in our communities anymore. And I also realized another thing is that when we do nonpartisan work and we tell our communities to go vote, but we don't educate them about the people that they should vote for, that's doing them a huge disservice. And so actually this was in 2016, as well. I knocked on the door of, I was knocking doors for a Democratic candidate who ended up being the first openly gay Korean American man to serve in our state house. He flipped a seat that was held by like a 3-term incumbent Republican. So these things can happen. But we weren't even targeting Vietnamese voters, but there happened to be a Vietnamese man on our door list. And so whoever was scheduled to like knock on that person's door, they basically came and got me and my sister because they were like, this dude's Vietnamese and we can't communicate. So my sister and I went, and both of us have very elementary Vietnamese. So we tried to talk to this man, and it was a very hard conversation for us to have because we're not really equipped to talk about politics very well in Vietnamese. But he asked us, he was like, well, can I vote for Trump and Hillary Clinton? And it was such a crazy question. And we're like, 1, no, and 2, why would you want to do that? They are vastly different candidates. And so what ended up happening is, and then, you know, we talked to him a little bit more, and he was like, well, you know, I do want to go vote, but I need a ride to the polls and I would need an interpreter. So what ended up happening is we scheduled, we came back. We had somebody call him who actually could speak way better Vietnamese than us and who actually talked to him about the candidates and the differences. And then we came back and the interpreter and the man went to the polls together, and I babysat his kids because he was like, well, I don't want to bring my kids. And so, and this was all like, and then we just like met on the doorstep, and he's like, yeah, sure, babysit my kids. So I like was at his house for like a couple hours just babysitting his kids. But it was just, it took so much just to get that one voter. It involved so many people, from the interpreter to like driving to like babysitting the kids. And so, but in the end, it was a vote, and he voted for, you know, he voted for Hillary. He voted for the candidate whose door we were knocking. So, but it really illustrates to me, I think, the lack of outreach that's done to our communities and the necessity for it to be in language too.
I wanted to jump in here because a lot of your story, you know, I'm reflecting on how I came into doing the work that I do. I was just working on a campaign on the city council for a Black candidate here, but you know, I stuck by it because any question that came up about which party that the candidate was, you know, because it's a city council, so I could totally snuck by it with all nonpartisan answer. At that moment, I realized the power of nonpartisan work because it's a lot easier to knock on people's door and just talk randomly about voting in general. And then as the conversation go on, you can actually steer the conversation a little bit more narrow focus. But after that, like I really, really want to go more, to do more work in the API community because I look around and recognize there was a lot of, well, there was a lack of representation for the Asian community in, you know, local government, even in the federal as well. And I kept questioning that a lot. And then some of the conversation I have with the voter at the door, then that when I realized that most of the folks don't really entirely know everything about the candidates nor the issue. You know, in a white space, even white people don't even know half of the props anyway, like, you know, we'll continually have to educate them. But then when I come back out of it, I realize that I do a lot of work in the white space. Like, why am I not doing more work in my Vietnamese folks and get them to vote, right? I struggle a lot in terms of like you guys said, how we register the folks to vote, but then, you know, they may vote Republican. But then when I walk away from that pause, I keep thinking to myself, like, well, duh, because they're watching Fox News, and that's the only thing that educates them on the issue, then of course they can vote that way. So in my mind at this point right now, that I'm thinking, you know, the burden is on me to try to educate my folks more, like if I have more opportunity to knock on door or calling them and talk to them, then maybe they can vote our way. Because just like Nikki said, like sometimes I call these older folks, it's so funny because my team, all of us are volunteer, and they're really nervous about speaking Vietnamese because they don't speak it well. And then I have to kind of like, I'm just trying to tell my team members that, folks is actually pretty forgiving about that. Like every time that you try to speak Vietnamese with them, they thought it's so cute that you try. And then the conversation suddenly got easier and easier because you're trying, right? And then like, so I love it. I love it every time I talk to some old folks. I'll be like, yeah, I am 43 young, but I look really young. Like even when I'm in front of them, they're like, oh, Gally, like recently we went to knock on somebody's door for sunset. This old man literally shook the entire tree. Fruit was falling down all over, and I was like crawling on the ground picking up the fruit because I don't want to waste it. I walk away with 10 pounds of fruit. This is our folks.
What kind of fruit?
It was it's I can't remember if it's sort of like a peach but really tiny. It's sour, and I eat with
Apricot.
Yeah, apricot, and I eat with like salt and pepper. That's how we eat it. But I
You
just
gotta eat with
thinking
salt and chili pepper.
yes, that's what we do. So I'm like, that's why I like every time I go to these houses, I'm just like, this is our people. We gotta talk to them because all of the other campaign, they don't do a good job at talking to our people. And so it's really up to us to do that. And I really believe in the power of voter education. And if we knock on their door, we talk to them, then they kind of vote in a different way, right? Because we're like telling them like, hey, Fox News is not all of that. Like it have a lot of misinformation. Let's talk about over here. This is a real reality over here. So I'm hoping for that a lot.
I guess I'll jump in here. I was trying to figure out how to connect. And then I'm like, okay. Connecting on what happens when you knock on a Viet door and the food that they offer you. Yeah, I feel like, I got involved into electoral work maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, kind of like Tuan. But I was having a conversation with a comrade, and he was like, he was trying to be like, what is the one political act that most people in the United States do more than anything? And then I was like, I don't know, protest? And he was like, no, like they vote. And it just felt like it felt like so mundane that I was like, okay. And I think 8 years ago in the Vietnamese community, 8 years ago in sort of our political context feels like forever ago, but we were in a different political context. And I think back then, to me, working in the Viet community, it was still really hard to get people to commit to political acts of any kind. So I thought, if we could do work to get folks to vote and like name that as a political act, that would open the door for us to like then launch into other conversations. To me, it was like, if folks are down to vote, how closer does that take us one step closer to like being on the streets, long term. And I think that I met with a lot of, or the folks I work with met with a lot of the same, a lot of the same sort of like restrictions that other folks had. But the other thing that was surprising to me too, and I think this is because I work in Philadelphia, where there's a smaller Viet community, but the political diversity that actually exists when you actually have these one-on-one conversations, surprised me, because I kind of was just like, oh yeah, everyone's gonna like register Republican, but I can't tell you how many like grandmas like be grabbing my arm and be like, independent, like no affiliation, like, and that was like their thing of like, I know some shit's wrong with this country, but I'm not gonna say it because of the policing, because of how virulent shit is in our community. So like for them, it was like, you know, hush, hush. At that point, like, yeah, I'm a Democrat, but I'm looking around like someone's going to call me out, because that's the history of our community. That gave me hope back then, because I was just like, okay, there's a lot more room to move than I thought, you know? And we've been having conversations with folks ever since then, but it's like a slow build with, you know, with some of our elders. And we have had so many conversations where folks are just like, they trust us because we worked in the community for so long. They're like, who should I vote for, you know? And I'm like, I can't tell you, but let's talk about issues. That's part of the reason why, you know, we decided to create this work to create, and it's not just us in the Vietnamese community, but in the Chinese community and other Asian communities in Philadelphia, working together to try to create a different vehicle to be able to do that voter education more intentionally, has been why we're like, okay, we're going to create this other organizational formation that's a C4. I think in terms of my parents, it's really interesting. You know, my dad is like, my parents did not vote either. I have been doing this work every year, you know, I got my sister to vote every year, you know, and then I'm like, my sister lives in Houston, Texas. And then I was like, you have to take our parents to vote, right? And so like they didn't, and my mom does not listen to English media at all. Don't vote, whatever, right? She voted for Hillary back then, and she did it because she was like, oh, my daughter, like she was inspired by her daughters, but now she's like hella, you know, pro-Trump, and because she listens to my dad, and my dad reads English media a lot, but I feel like, I mean, and I think we're going to get into this next, which is like the terrain, right? But like, I think that what's happening in the Viet community with the messaging points that are happening right now, it's like creating a perfect storm that is like landing on some real nativist, like deep-seated shit in the Vietnamese community, some of the trauma that we have not unpacked, and I feel like that's getting wrapped up in a lot of like the anti-China stuff, right? What is that about? And you know, like, what is that tapping into? All of this stuff and at the same time, where there's like, we're living through the Black uprising, this iteration of the Black uprising, which is really calling into question the United States again, but like in real ways. And that I feel like the story that like so many of our elders have told themselves about why they're here and what legitimizes them being here is also being threatened. And like part of holding on to that is like holding on to Trump. I feel like that's been a big part of the heartbreak, which is not being able to figure out like the fissures, to hold on to like, you know, that layer of our people. Yeah, but I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, Nancy and everyone. I want to spend a little bit of time there, particularly around the heartbreak, contradictions, and conflicts. You know, this conversation is meant to be real talk, so we'll definitely get to clarity, but I do want to acknowledge that there is a lot of energy right now that actually needs some spaciousness for. But before we do that, I want to give shout outs to people who are watching. Hi, Kang. Hi, Luan, Tim, Christina, Julie, Anle, Jessica, let's see, Anyan, Win Nam, let's see, who else? Karen, Trin, Mark, Phi, Trin, Jivo, and that's who I have so far. Thank you all for being present, and yeah, continue to offer love, presence, questions, comments in the thread, and we'll come back to it closer to the end of the call. So on this topic of heartbreak and contradiction and conflict, you know, when I was thinking about this panel, I was like, I'm probably not the best person to talk about electoral justice, electoral organizing work, because I'm highly critical and highly skeptical. I don't believe in that particular system, but I believe in people. I believe in you all, right? So I'm deeply invested in continuing to learn and struggle with this contradiction for me. And, you know, I think I supported Bernie in 2016. I supported him this time around. Was super disappointed when he dropped out at what I felt was pretty early. Definitely disappointed in the Biden-Harris ticket. I know Trump needs to get out of office. That, for me, that's not even a question. So there's this energy right now around, you know, around, yeah, just this the kind of the usual energy that kind of surfaces around when presidential elections happen. And what I'm seeing in some of the Facebook group, the threads, I want to kind of lift up. There's definitely interest around trying to move Trump supporters, and how difficult that's been for folks, and how it's just going to continue to be for folks. And like, would love to hear all your insights on that, and just like, what does it mean to do that? What are our limitations around that, etc. I've been also seeing, like, which is pretty common and will continue to be common up to November, but after November, which is voter shaming and voter blaming, right? Getting upset at people, criticizing people for not voting, for thinking about not voting. And if, you know, Buddha forbid, if Trump wins in November, I can already see it happening, right? Where all the blame is gonna go. Oh, it's the leftists, it's the radicals, it's the folks who were too ideal and didn't want to vote, right? So that energy is already there too. And then Nancy, to your point around also seeing a lot of anti-China, anti-communist rhetoric, and kind of using that as a position to gain support, which for me just reinforces, you know, like xenophobia. It reinforces potential U.S. militarism, you know, both international and domestically. You know, it perpetuates Cold War dynamics. So it's like, oh, when I see that, it's heartbreaking as well. Yeah, and so I think some of the things I'm grappling with right now, and just really would love to hear from you all how you're also dealing with these, or maybe other heartbreak or contradictions. That would yeah, would love to hear that as well. Who wants to start us off? Real talk.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Just to tag on to what you said, because I also resonate with what you said. Yesterday, Ruth Wilson Gilmore was in conversation with Miriam Kaba. They're the two incredible thinkers, leaders, and giants of the abolitionist movement. And I wrote down what Ruth Wilson Gilmore said: electoral politics is unlikely to be the mode where people relieve themselves of the constant crisis that comes from capitalism. And to tag on to that, Angela Davis, who's also now the abolitionist, said, I don't see this election as being about choosing a candidate who will be able to lead us in the right direction. It will be about choosing a candidate who can be most effectively pressured into allowing more space for the evolving anti-racist movement. So those are some of the guidance. That's the guidance that I go off of in thinking about electoral organizing right now. And I think there's so much attention towards the presidential election that it takes away other kinds of elections, other kinds of races that I think have more material consequences on like the day-to-day lives. Not to say that presidential elections don't have consequences, they really, really do. But in terms of just local politics, the city of Seattle has a certain amount of money. The city of Seattle allocates a certain amount of money to certain programs, certain neighborhoods. And that determines the funding for schools, that determines all kinds of funding. And those are some of the elections or the races that we don't hear as much about because the media puts all of its attention on the presidential races. And so I think of electoral organizing from very much a local perspective. I don't think too far up the ballots, because I think there is enough analysis and conversation and attention already on that.
Yeah, I agree with Nikki there. Like, I virtually stopped talking about Trump. I decided it was just too crazy for me. Like, my partner kept sharing his crazy tweet. You know, I mean, like, you mean the same one from yesterday, or too many of them? And the local races are really important. And basically, for here in San Diego, we have the mayor race, right? So, and just like you guys, just like Nikki, I also believe in abolition as well. So the most momentous moment here was when the community organizer, unleashed like 1,000 people participate in the conversation around the city budget and the demand to defund the police. And then all the council turned around and voted for not to do that, but rather increase approve the budget, the police budget increase. So people were really pissed off about that. And I took that night calm. We were just like a really long day of organizing, listen to like 11 hours of public comments, and to have that vote, right, it was really painful. And then I reflected of like across the space, like even the federal level and everywhere, because the movement is happening. And we're realizing that a lot of elected officials will not going to vote defund the police. So what does that mean? So so I try to focus more on the local races, because I think that that's where we have to change the conversation around defund the police, like actually take their budget away. And I can't really do that until like we get local people who believe our values to go in there. So I totally with you right there, like local politics.
I want to share a little bit about what's on my mind right now. I feel like y'all are, this is going to totally shift the mood. I'm feeling very jaded right now. So, you know, in my day job, I do civic engagement work, communications work, and I'm in California. So we have like 18 days until ballots hit everyone's mailboxes. So I'm just like all day crunching on my computer, being angry all the time, super jaded, super mad. That's where I'm coming from right now. I'm just gonna lay it out there. But I really wanna just like acknowledge everyone who is feeling jaded about the election right now. I think we had, earlier Tuan had mentioned voting shaming. That is totally not the intent of this panel, but I really wanna share with you all a little bit about where I'm at, my journey to accept civic engagement, to utilize civic engagement, and it's an ongoing journey to continue to want to utilize this method. So for me, a little bit about me, I am pretty young. I graduated college, I don't know, like 2017, I don't know how many years ago that was. And then after that, I went into grad school, studied Asian American studies, and have since then been involved in grassroots community organizing as well as academia. And my mindset towards civic engagement, especially in academia spaces when you can just like sit and theorize and think about theory, is like very much like civic engagement is just upholding these structures that already exist. And these are harmful structures that don't exist to serve our people. So that was my mindset, still sort of is my mindset, but yet, you know, right now I spend my full-time job as well as working overtime engaging in civic engagement. And the question that I always ask myself is like, why? Like I still grapple with this idea of like, do I believe in this? Do I not believe in this? Why am I doing this? I myself was a never Biden person. When Bernie dropped out of the election, I was like, Biden is not going to get my vote. I am not going to volunteer for his campaign. I live in California, so I was like, it doesn't matter. But then I think what really shifted my personal thinking into being a never Biden person to being like, all right, I think I will definitely vote for Biden. I might volunteer to call some folks. And even though just the other day I re-registered to vote, I took out my Dem card and re-registered to vote as an independent because I'm still really mad. But the thing that pushed me to that point was just like this feeling of like the apocalypse, especially living in California. Like last week, the sky was red, like for like a full 48 hours. Like we were living under a red sky, and just thinking about climate change and 4 years of an administration who does not believe in climate change. I don't know what that means for the human population. And I was just so concerned that that was the pushing point for me to be like, all right, I'm gonna sign up for some phone banking ships, gonna call some folks to vote for Biden. It was just like a complete turnaround for me. And I don't know why I shared this story, but another thing I did want to share was to not ignore our people, right? I think we are all aware that we have conservative folks within our Vietnamese community, but I'm going to share some insider secrets from the civic engagement nonprofit space. Especially in California, we have noticed that, you know, with these campaigns, even statewide propositions, they don't prioritize Asian American and Pacific Islander voters. In terms of funding, it's very much devoted towards like outreaching to Latinx communities. And in terms of outreaching to AAPI communities, they think that our communities are not movable, or that we're not going to vote, or that we don't have power. And I think the reason why I choose to continue engaging in civic engagement, even though I just shared all these pessimistic and jaded viewpoints, is because it pisses me off that these people who are building power in civic engagement think that our people don't deserve a seat at the table, think that we don't have power, that we don't want power, that the conservatives own us. And I think I'm continuing to engage in these spaces, even though I'm questioning myself every day. I'm continuing to engage in these spaces is to resist that, and to show that we do in fact have power and deserve power, and we will carve that space out for ourselves.
Thanks for sharing your journey. I'm sure that's really helpful for people to hear you go through that struggle and continue to go through it. I live in Georgia, and the political climate is awful in Georgia and has been for a long time. And when Trump got elected, the federal political climate became really unbearable. So in Georgia, we are constantly fighting actually at basically every level. And to me, it's unfathomable that people of color that live in the state of Georgia are going to have to continue to fight at all levels of government for another 4 years. Like, that is unthinkable to me. And so I think the floor is getting Trump out, and then we can continue to build from there. And I listened to a podcast recently with Baratunde Thurston, and it's called How to Citizen. And I really enjoyed listening to him talk about politics and how to citizen. And he doesn't use the term citizen to mean, you know, you have to have like a certain immigration status, but he just uses it to mean you are an active participant in your community, and you're taking power and building your collective future together. And he talks about electoral politics as co-governance. And I really like the way he talks about that really resonates with me, because I don't think that we should think about electoral politics as we elect people, that's it, that's like our one time engaging with them, and then we have no say in what they continue to do. But we should really think of it as, who do we want to co-govern with? Because at the end of the day, they're there to serve us, and they have to listen to us. And if I have to choose between co-governing with Biden or Trump, obviously I'm going to choose Biden every time, because I think that there is room for movement and co-governance where there isn't with somebody like Trump. And the other thing I will say on the local level is it's the same thing. In 2018, we almost got to elect the first Black woman governor in the whole country ever. It was incredible. More people voted for Stacey Abrams than they voted for Obama. And the movement was electrifying. She is very smart. And she was one of the few candidates that I really saw build a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial coalition that included Asian Americans. And, you know, in the South, when we talk about race, it's always black and white, and Asians never get to be a part of that conversation. We don't have a space in the dialogue, but she made space for us. And the election was stolen from her. And every day, I think, especially now, I think all the time under this pandemic about what alternative universe people in the state of Georgia could be living. Because if the pandemic has laid anything to bear, then our leaders actually do play a tremendous role in how we get to live our lives. That is playing out at the federal level, but you see it state by state too, because how we're managing COVID in Georgia is vastly different from how it's being managed elsewhere. And people in our state are dying and they are not being protected at all. And I think while all of this is happening, then Georgia's cutting healthcare. So I think all the time about the alternative universe that we could be living. And I know Stacey Abrams would not be perfect because nobody is perfect, but it would be so different. It would save so many lives. We could have so many conversations that would be fruitful. We could be building towards something instead of constantly building against something and putting out all these fires. So that's what I think about. And honestly, I've been so jaded too with electoral politics since 2018. After Stacey Abrams lost, I was like, fuck it. Nobody come to me about electoral politics anymore. I'm done. I watched with my own eyes like that election get stolen, because I did election protection all day and I witnessed voter suppression like all day. It was terrible. So after 2018, I was like, no more, I'm done. I'm tired of getting my hopes up and my heart broken. But then recently, I read an article that she wrote, and it was so inspiring. And if anybody has a reason to be super jaded by politics, it is her. And she is out there building. She has not stopped. And also encouraging us to invest in the system. And I was like, damn it, she is the only one who can still make me have feels about voting after I feel so jaded by it. But like the way that she ends her article, and this has resonated with me right now, is she says, voting will not save us from harm, but silence will surely damn us all. And that's how I feel right now.
It's really amazing to sort of hear where everyone's at in their like locations. So I just want to hold that. I think working in Pennsylvania feels different in that like we're always getting inundated day in and day out about us being like a swing state, and about how our work needs to like really be focused on this broad thing, and that it's all numbers. It's so I feel like it's like a different type of intensity, that it's sort of like this is how Pennsylvania could impact like all of these other states. It's like, oh my God. So it makes, every time I wake up and like my team feels it, it's like we're breathing in like and feeling responsibility, and it's like obviously it's, you know, each of us is just one person and we're just trying to do what we can. But as you were talking, Phi, a lot of what you said resonated, and I was taking some notes in terms of like keeps me in and being jaded, like going back to Lan. Am I jaded? I don't know. I feel like I've compartmentalized it. I feel like because of this onslaught of like, this is what Pennsylvania means, you know, like 44,000 votes And like, this is what you can do. It's like, I've compartmentalized my emotions. So that's one. I feel like we've been the insanity of the elections is at a height in Pennsylvania. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about long term. And so I am also really inspired and really really inspired and take a lot of lessons um, from certain electoral projects in the country. I think about, so the project that really inspired me was Chokwe Lumumba's election in Jackson, Mississippi, that was like held by that was held by the Malcolm X grassroots movement. And I remember when we went to Mississippi and we're learning from the folks there, they were like, yeah, it took 40 years. It took 40 years of deep building. Because when we talk about being jaded too, right? And I totally hear, you know, who should be jaded but like Stacey Abrams. I'm like, who should be jaded but the entire Black community? Like, you know, and then so it's like, and so I feel like when they were like, it took 40 years of organization building, relationship building, organization building, leadership development, political education. And that, to me, at that time, when I was kind of like learning and figuring out where to plant myself, I was like, oh, 40, okay. I was like, well, I've only been doing this a couple of years, but 40, okay. And I think it just sort of expanded like my own thinking of my place, my role, what I'm trying to do. You know, I graduated from college in 2001 and was very like skeptical of the nonprofit industrial complex, like all of this stuff. And then also really aware that like I had a full-time job in a nonprofit for most of my years doing this work. There's so many contradictions. We can have another panel about those contradictions. But I mean, like, what does 40 years of investment look like in your community from a leftist perspective in the United States? Like, what would that be? And so I was like, all right, I'm going to plant myself in Philly. And that's what this whole thing has been about, you know? In each year, the community may see it like we're registering you to vote, or we have a campaign to save this plaza, or we want to end the tax abatements, or like whatever it is. But it's honestly the same line of the same conversation, which is, are we going to take ourselves seriously enough in this country to be part of the governing structure? And then are we going to be taking ourselves seriously enough to not only take over, and change it? Because we're in this political moment where we have cities abolishing the police. And what that means is then there's space for creating that replacement, right? And so I think absolutely now have been thinking about this in a long-term way, trying to not get caught up in this. And I also agree like totally with Nikki and with what everyone else is saying in terms of at every moment we need to be working towards like constantly shifting the balance of power and creating better political conditions for us to fight for what we know our communities deserve, all of our communities deserve. The Vietnamese community, the refugee community, and especially like the Black and Brown communities that came before us and have been leading these fights, you know. And so I think that this is definitely one of the notches in that fight. It feels like listening to Lan be like living under this red sky, you know, on the East Coast, like texting, you know, my friends, like my comrades in Cali, and being like, holy you know, dude. And when I look at the map, it's burning everywhere. Like, are you okay? You know, like, I mean, I think about, yeah, I think like, I sometimes definitely get lost in what it takes to win tomorrow, but I know that what I'm committed to is like, what does it take for us to like win like liberation for the long term? And this is the next notch. Yeah. Thanks, Carolina. I just got the permission to curse.
Yes, curse, damn it. And yeah, I think, on this thing, and thank you just everyone for being honest and sharing more. And, on this theme of being jaded, I think, being jaded, for me isn't about not caring or isn't about not being active. I think being jaded is actually a response, a very internal human response to really a lot of despair. And I think part of what I believe is going to continue to activate folks and towards November, beyond November, is to really allow space for that despair to exist, right? Not just within the Viet community, but we're in our solidarity work. Being in solidarity with the movement for Black Lives is about being able to acknowledge, hold, understand another community's despair and trauma and experiences and hopes and aspirations, and not necessarily needing anything back from it. I think sometimes this conversation happens around, especially trying to move Viet folks around, oh, well, we need to prove why the movement for Black Lives deserves our support. We need to show that, the Black community has supported the Viet community, and that will somehow then, give people a better reason to then support, solidarity work. So there's that aspect of it that I feel like we just need to kind of continue to flesh out as a community. And, I think this conversation around clarity and kind of talking about next steps and long-term movement building, before we move into that part, I would love to hear everyone's thoughts around just this particular navigation around the Viet community. Like strategically, how do we move into November? What are the limitations? Where should we, it's like, what can we let go of? What do we need to focus on, et cetera? So if you have any insight around that, that would be great in terms of your own personal experience or even your own personal limitations. Right? I think folks would probably find some value in that. So how do we continue to navigate our Viet community? Who wants to go?
Yeah, I'm gonna go first this time. I'm gonna go first this time to just get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way.
Yeah, so I feel like I have a confession. And it's not what other folks have said on this. And I think that, y'all, it is because we live in Pennsylvania. But I feel like this has also been part of my own I feel like my political journey over like the last 10 years of working in the Viet community and building with some of these like grandfathers and aunties and all this stuff. I feel like I feel like after George Floyd and after all of the conversations around like anti-Blackness in our community, I had a change of heart where, my organizing upbringing was like, you got to meet people where they're at. You got to bring them with you. That's what it's about. Got to meet people where they're at and you got to bring them with you. And I just had a breaking point over the summer, right? When I was like, I'm kind of similar to Jin Hui, where it was like, okay, we have an opportunity, the Philadelphia, we're going to try to like fight for 120 mil off of the police budget in Philadelphia. Okay. And then also we got to like build these alternatives and scale them up. And it was like, I was like, personally, how I don't have enough capacity to be doing the building of the new thing and the meeting of people where they're at and waiting for them to come with me. And I had a conversation, and I've said this in a previous spot where it was just like, our community needs to heal in so many ways, in so many deep ways, and that is legitimate, and that takes a lifetime, and like justice is needed now. And I just had this change of heart of like, okay, I need to move forward with the folks that are ready to come with me. And that's kind of how I've been going at it for this last couple of months. I feel like, you know, it's, and again, I think like it's not leaving folks behind, but the reality is if we fight for this stuff and win, if we defund if we are able to defund the police and schools get more funding, whose kids get that money? That's all of these kids, right? That's all of the people I had to like let go for a little bit so that we can move forward faster. I don't think this is going to be my energy always. Maybe this is where my jadedness comes in. But it's like, you know, we have like, part of me is like, I really want to talk to the undecided voters. I really want to talk to the aunties that came to me and be like, who should I vote for, Gong? You know, I want to talk to folks who need more information. And I can't spend so much time getting into the rabbit hole that has captured so much of our community. Well, that has captured, I would say, a certain section of our community. We do, there's some folks who are on the team, some of the teams I work with, and they do voter registration. We're doing voter registration like at, you know, different Viet spots. And the things that people are hearing, it's like the conspiracy theories and the vitriol and like all of that, it's beyond heartbreaking. It's actually traumatizing to like some of our folks. I mean, to, you know, how many times can you have this conversation? So I feel like, you know, I guess you know, it depends on what state you're in, but I really do want to focus on the folks who feel undecided and talk to them about like what's at stake. And then for all the folks who are like gonna like scream and yell at me and all of this stuff about all of the red baiting stuff, all of that, I just know in my heart, like I still love you, but I don't have to hold you in your anger right now. That's not what I'm about right now. And we're gonna move this shit forward. Feel free to take it in a different direction, folks.
Oh, thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, I agree with Nancy a lot. Like, you know, fortunately we live in California, so I take the comfort, and I feel cheating in a way because I know Nancy is doing the work in Philadelphia. There's so much harder to fight when it compared to California. But I take the comfort in the fact that, you know, the Vietnamese folks who vote for Trump, the vote's probably going to mean nothing. I mean, like, whatever, because Trump can't win California. And so like, I want to hold them in a certain area, like a certain way. Like, you know, like, these are my people, they're traumatized about voting, they're misinformed about the political landscape, and they fall right into that hole and they voted. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I want to be compassionate around that. Like, every time I read, you know, I approach one of those folks and I'll be like, oh, okay, yes, I get it. But can you also vote for the local candidate that we need? Yeah, they don't really, you know, like, or the props that we need. So I'm like, during the conversation over there, instead of like falling into that whole Trump boy thing. But I definitely focusing more on building the structure for the younger generation to come up. So like, for instance, for my nonprofit group, Big Vote, I focus a lot more on like finding the people who share the same perspective. And then also like, you know, younger generation, so that way I can pass on some of the leadership skill and then have, hopefully they lead the generation, right? They lead us coming up. But when it comes to Biden conversation, it's so difficult because a lot of places, even in my other spaces, like I hear so much anti-Biden. And it got me nervous for a long time because I also hear people bickering around that too. Like I come over here, hear people bickering about Trump, and I come over here, I hear people bickering about Biden. I'm like, oh my God, how can we mend all of this space together sort of way, because you're just tearing everything apart. And so my method of organizing now around it is like trying to be more compassionate, try to let people hear, like let them know their pain being acknowledged, they being heard, and then like, I get it, you're feeling that, let you have the moment. And then we can now, when that happened, then we can talk about like, let's be realistic about how we're gonna vote, because we can lose this election, right? And I keep trying to tell people, it's like, it's not even a long-term thing. It's not even this short-term moment right now, because the result of Trump was the result of a decade of racism. And even the result of Biden, it was the result of decades of, voter suppression, all of the electoral process, rigging the system all over the places. So in order for us to even unpack and resolve decades of that work, we have to take many, many steps to build that, right? So while we're building that, let's focus on one goal right now. They're thinking about the Supreme Justice. I don't know about y'all, but our TV is on her last leg. She's been in and out hospital for so long. And I keep telling people, it's like, elected official, you can vote them in and out. Trump, we survived 4 years, right? We survived him. Well, fine. We'll survive him for now. So, but the people that he appointed into the Supreme Justice, I mean, like, they're stay there forever. Those folks like that guy that he just did, I mean, like, he appointed in, he's going to be there for another 30 years. We cannot afford to have another conservative justice sitting in this thing. And then we're going to like take forever to take them out. So but I'm begging people, please just think about that. Like the presidency, whatever that is, Biden for 4 more years, you'll be fine. But meanwhile, can we focus on this one? Make sure we get whoever that is and get us a new Supreme Justice. So that's my strategy, by the way.
As folks, just because of time, as folks are sharing, if you want to share, just your approach to the Vit community, as well as what are your strategies or thinking beyond November, long term. You can share that as well, and then we'll come back to folks who have already shared.
I can go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very clear that what I am working against are the systems and not one identifiable person. So if I'm fighting anti-Blackness and racism, racism is embedded in the structures and the institutions of this country. So I am not one person who is racist, whether they are voted in or out. The systems and the structures are still in place. And I'm constantly thinking about how to fuck up those systems. And as someone who does a lot of kind of academic theoretical work around race and gender and class, and coming from the perspective that oppression comes in institutional, interpersonal, ideological, and internalized forms. And when people who are marginalized sort of cape for their oppressors, they must be experiencing internalized oppression. So I've kind of operated with that thinking, but I've actually changed my mind. So I think the theme that I've heard from others is like shift in thinking. And I've definitely shifted in my thinking in how I think about Viet communities. And I say communities because I don't think there is one. And I used to think, there's a lot of trauma, like you mentioned, Trung, there's a lot of stuff that we need to heal from. There's a lot of internalized stuff. But lately I've been like, it's not that these some of these people have internalized oppression. They align with the oppressors, actually. They're fine. Like, and that is not unprecedented, right? Like in every history ever of every colonized culture, nation ever, there's always been a class of people that has aligned with the oppressor. And so not all skin folk are kinfolk. And Ruth Wilson Gilmore said, an identity is not the same as a consciousness. And I'm at the point where if I'm trying to fuck up these systems, I need to figure out how to organize for power, like actual real power, with people who might be sharing the goals and the values that I have, rather than constantly trying to go after my skin folk who actually may be aligning with the oppressive forces that I'm trying to take down. So, like Nancy said, like there's an economy of energy, and if I still live in this dimension and abide by the rules of physics of time and space in this dimension, then I have to figure out how to spend it in the most efficient way in the time that I have left on Earth to live, to truly crack the systems.
Thank you for sharing that, Nikki. And you already started going into thinking longer term, right? And what are our kind of parameters and how focus and whatnot. And so, yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Folks want to share other kind of long-term thinking beyond November? I know November is a key focal point, but beyond November, what does it mean to build power? What are you all already doing, have been doing, looking at doing? I think Lan and Phi haven't shared from the last round, so you're welcome to go.
I'm really interested in defunding the police and abolishing ICE and totally overhauling the immigration system. And I don't think that any of that is going to happen without a changing of guards. And so I think that there's a lot of improvement to be made with the system, but I think that there's also a lot of change that needs to happen within the existing system first in the short term. And then once we get new leaders in, then we can talk about changing policies and making more systemic changes to how we do things as well. So yeah, I'm just in general, I'm very interested in decriminalization of people and of immigrants in all of the ways that manifest at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. But I think a lot of that work can't happen unless you have leaders in place who are going to listen to you. And I think, I think everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people shared about how there's so much movement right now around defunding the police. And my God, they're like, hating ICE has even become mainstream. I've gotten so much more engagement with any posts that I have about abolishing ICE, like in the last 2 days, than I have in a long time, from people who have never shown any engagement with anything like when I talk about ICE. But there's a lot of really bad attention around ICE and their practices right now. So the energy's there. And I feel like there's a lot of energy on the streets and a lot of support around defunding the police, but we had some of the same issues in Atlanta where people were really motivated to defund the police and call, and there were lots of public calls for reimagining what public safety can look like. And that was really energizing and inspiring, but it was also kind of terrible because you can see that the public will and the community will is there, but if it's falling on deaf ears, then that's not going to get us where we need to go. And so I'm interested in putting people in office who will listen more and have that conversation and actually help, like I said, co-govern and like build the future that we all want to have. And I think electoral politics has to be a tool that's engaged in that process, but it's just one tool. It's not the only one, but it's an entire ecosphere of people who participate in the process towards building what we want to see long term.
I think going off of what you were saying, Phi, about co-governing and building power, I think what you all had shared, what a lot of folks have shared about conserving our energy for this upcoming election and focusing on folks who are movable rather than having these frustrating, traumatizing, heartbreaking conversations with our Trump supporting family members and network members. I'm definitely in alignment with that. But in terms of looking for the future, I really do have a lot of hope and a lot of faith in our community members. And I do believe that, you know, not for this election probably, but in the long term, I do have a lot of faith in our community to heal past the trauma that we have and to further dig into why our communities have these beliefs. That's like a 10-hour long, that's another 10-hour long panel. But to really focus on shifting the narrative around our community, right? I think it is really easy for people outside of our community to write Vietnamese Americans off as like, they're Trump supporters, we're not going to reach out to them. But I feel like it's even more sad for us to do it to our own community members and be like, yo, like we don't want to talk to our own community members. And I think it's such a tricky balance because I also acknowledge like the pain that comes with having those conversations and the heartbreak. So like the question is, how do we go about calling in our community members and having these conversations without inducing trauma to ourselves? And I think like a really key strategy here is intergenerational organizing and narrative frameworks. I really want to applaud and call out all of the organizations that are Vietnamese American organizations that are doing intergenerational organizing, like VROC, Vietnamese Rainbow Orange County, and many other organizations are doing the work successfully. And I hope that other organizations learn from those models and we can do intergenerational healing and organizing together. And also a very key component as well is media, like what media are folks consuming and what is that saying? And I think in order to get political power, we need to get media power as well. So, I mean, I want to call out Phi for your work with Wake Up Atlanta and other folks who are in this group, the Vietnamese Solidarity and Action Network group, who we're doing the work in translating articles from progressive and reliable sources and translating that into Vietnamese and making that accessible. And I think as time goes on and our folks create more of these resources, and not just translating resources, but building our own networks, our own media networks, and our own, this is my background as a filmmaker coming in, but building our own stories and telling our own stories that it's not just in our own language, but it is true to our history and our culture and our values. That's going to start shifting the narrative. And I know that there are a lot of people out there doing that work. And I have hope that as time goes on, more people are going to internalize those narratives and really change hearts and minds.
I just want to take a brief moment. Thank you, folks, for sharing so far. Just want to welcome Kat and Coy and Gwen to the conversation. We already started, and Ngelp as well. We already started offering some links in the chat, in the comment thread around things that folks can get involved with. I know there's a lot of interest around where folks can plug in. We'll continue to offer that as a follow-up as well. And then folks on the who are speaking tonight, if you can also share other opportunities that folks may get involved with, either locally or that you're aware of, and then we'll continue to compile that as well. And then just any kind of final thoughts just around, yeah, what's next for you all in terms of where you want to put some energy, focus, and some love. And everyone can share, please.
I want to continue off of what Lan was sharing. So I know that I started the conversation before the jaded side came out. Didn't compartmentalize that well, but I do want to just name how amazing it is to be able to be not only in conversation with a lot of the folks on the panel, but like in community with, like I feel held down by a lot of the folks on the panel. There's been folks that are supporting the VSAN network that have been doing this work for like 10, 15, 20 years that I feel totally held down by too. And so what gives me hope and where I want to continue to put my energy is in building this community, right? Like this is whoever's watching this and whoever's on this Facebook page, and you know, it's like when I got started like 10 years ago, this didn't exist. And now it's like, now it's so rich, right? With a lot of what, of the resources and the people and the energy that is, I think, the spearhead that will move our community collectively in a different direction. And so for me, like, I know I wanna invest my energy in what rejuvenates me, or I don't know, you know, comes back, that, yeah, that word. It's 9:30 where I'm at, y'all. And so I just want to appreciate the folks on this panel for being in community with me, you know, from all the different places that y'all are, and the folks who are watching, and all of the folks who have just been holding it down all of these years. I don't think we understood the type of community that was out there until now. But yeah, so I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Nancy. I'm also super grateful to now know a bunch of progressive Vietnamese people, which I did not know growing up in Augusta, Georgia. I felt very alone out here, y'all. I want to actually use my time to plug some concrete next steps because we're less than 50 days from the election. And I know that there's a link of things that are being distributed to people, which is awesome. But I would just like to say there is an event coming up, a virtual event that Pivot is hosting on September 27th, where there are a lot of badass progressive Vietnamese women who have been working really hard to put this event together, to make it fun, but also really useful for people as we move forward and build, definitely in this moment and also beyond. And so I want to invite people to attend that, so that you can learn more about the multiple efforts that are going on. And then I would also like to, and this is related to Pivot work, but also knocking doors is very actually dear to my heart. And I'm sad that we can't really do it right now because of the pandemic. But I guess the silver lining, so to speak, is that it makes reaching voters much more virtual. And so there are, you know, if you're an enthusiastic Vietnamese person who wants to talk to Vietnamese voters in Georgia, not just about the presidential election, but about various elections in our state that will be really important for us, you can plug in and talk to Vietnamese voters. So I'm also working with our C4 organization in Georgia. It's a partnership between Pivot and our C4 to basically phone bank, not just for Biden, but we have 2 Senate seats that would be great if we could get a Democrat in one of them. And there's a congressional seat that's up that's, I think, been identified as one of the most flippable seats in the country. And that's in a district where there's about 8,000 Vietnamese voters. So I also want to just plug that link if you want to sign up for phone banking. It's the one that's, I think the website is tinyurl Viet's vote. So if y'all want to phone bank, please do, because it would mean, I think, so much to me and to, I know a lot of people who have been working really, really hard because we want to, you know, get Trump out so we can start building for something instead of just against something right now.
I'll share a little bit. I do want to encourage folks to go ahead and, even if you're not from these swing states, to do please lend your labor to these folks who are doing such amazing and difficult work in these swing states. But speaking as a Californian, someone who does statewide work in California, if you're someone who's from California and wants to make change directly in our state, my organization, AAPIs for Civic Empowerment, right now is working on a proposition to tax corporations and redistribute those funds to our local schools and community programs, which is something that has been, speaking of 40 years in the making, this also literally has been 42 years in the making as well. So for me, when I was very, very heartbroken when Bernie gave up the election, but I was also very excited to work on this proposition to stick it to the corporations and redistribute the fund to our schools and community programs. So I think there's a link going around in the chat right now if you want to get involved in California work. But again, I do want to encourage you all to lend your labor to Nancy and these organizations as well.
For me, I really take to heart what you said, Lang and Nancy, about long-term thinking and building power via media. I think a lot of the ways that the narratives are shaped are via all of the news sources, all of the media that people consume. Like Fox News is like not even 30 years old. Like, I think it was founded in like the mid 90s. And over the past couple of decades, it has been able to do the damage that it has in shaping all of these narratives. And I think one of the ways that we can counter that is to build our own media. And so I'm looking forward to we're working on a podcast for VSAN and also looking for ways to increase our media power.
Zhanghui or Nancy?
So yeah, I want to share so that I might, like I said earlier, like I don't really entirely focus on the election at the end goal for all of it, but I, because my group is really new, we're literally just formed maybe 2 years ago. I just turned 501 like last year. So I'm trying to build capacity and, you know, for a long term, and then also recruiting people that we can instill the leadership skills so they can lead in the future. But like right now, our goal is to build a Vietnamese senior center in City Heights where we actually do the work in the next 5 years. So definitely a lot of thought in my mind right now about how to build the power structure, you know, the tiny little block that help us to mobilize the community toward it. So instead of having our folks talking about Trump, we try to navigate the conversations that like, can you come together with us and mobilize on getting that senior center for our community? So I think at the end, like we're trying to focus more on issues, a lot more issues, and figure out on how to talk to our folks and educate them along the way too, because I think so that is a long-term goal, game plan that I have out here. I'm definitely going to take on some of your suggestion on volunteer here and share it out in my network and then help you all. And basically, I'm really, really concerned about Pennsylvania and Georgia as well. Like, you know, California, we're lucky in that perspective. Like, you know, so I'm going to try to figure out how to move people over there. And again, if you have postcards, let me know. I have, my partner is white, but he can write Vietnamese, you know. I'll make him write Vietnamese.
Oh God, that's awesome. Nancy?
Oh, I've just been blowing my nose this whole time. So real. Yeah, I guess next steps for folks, if folks have time and want to get involved in some of the insanity of a swing state, I think folks are plugging or putting just the link. I mean, Georgia and Pennsylvania, because we're on this panel, but there are others. I feel like you know, when we had imagined that we were going to build this organization, this C4, in 2020. We imagined it in 2017. And our thing was like, we knew that it was going to be crazy and it was going to be hype, and we were going to use this moment because there was going to be a lot of like opportunity to like be able to reach out to the most people and get infrastructure, because the idea was you build the vehicle to actually move. You know, the thing that we need to do in Pennsylvania is actually move statewide legislation. Shit's bad in Philadelphia because there's so much being controlled in Harrisburg, like our state capital. So we were like, oh, we're trying to be strategic and use this political moment to build the org that can actually do work at the statewide level, because we would have a broad membership. And then it just got like, who knew that 2020 was going to be like this? I remember 2016 feeling like, I can't wait for this year to end. This is a crazy year. And this 2020, like, just listening to where folks are at in the panel, you know, like the climate crisis and the pandemic and just all of this and this presidency and ICE, and the fact that ICE has a Vietnamese director, so I feel like yeah, a notch, yeah, fuck fam, a notch in the belt, but you know, we do need support, and we would love and appreciate folks joining our volunteer phone banks so that we can reach like as far into Pennsylvania as possible. You know, like our number is like that 44,000 vote, and it's not just us. Like there's a lot of organizations that are reaching out to move these votes. But yeah, I feel like I had another thing to say about next steps, but I mean, I don't know. I'll put it in the comment box later.
Yes. I believe that is everyone. Thank you so much to everyone just for staying past a little bit of time. I just wanted to share a few things before we formally close out. We'll follow up with a list of resources that folks have shared in the link in terms of ways to get involved. There's also a link in there for a form around doing prop-ups, which was actually inspired by Jean Hui, around prop talks. We're going to try to organize local, regional conversations with folks who want to talk through ballots, issues, etc., and you know, to do that collectively. You can sign up for that in the link as well. And there's definitely growing interest around how to continue engaging with family, and that's just an ongoing you know, interest and concern. So there's opportunities. We'll try to coordinate conversations around that as well. My recommendation is, you know, getting through the jadedness is to continue to put out the fires and also dream about the garden that we're trying to build as the fires are being put out, right? I think we can do both, and I would encourage folks to continue to join political organizations. I don't necessarily mean 501c3s, but organizations that are going to be able to hold a radical envisioning of what the world can look like, and also respond to the moment and deal with, again, putting out the very real fires that are needed, and building together, learning and growing together. That's extremely important. So I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to Phi, to Lan, to Nikki, Nancy, Jean-Hui, for being, for offering such powerful and really inspiring stories and reflections and insights, and being able to hold conflict and contradiction and offer hope. I also want to thank Carolina and Jessica for offering support around tech and comments and resources, and just the growing and powerful and amazing and inspiring community that is really going to continue to help us move forward. So good night to everyone. We'll post this video afterwards. Good night, be well, much love to you all, and we'll reconnect soon. Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.